Kwentuhan, no? Or as we say in Marberga, kwentutan. Sorry. Anyway, sorry. So please join us at the table kasi we didn't expect this kind of round pero square table. And then just so please feel free to join us or to come in. The reason why there's a microphone is because so they can record the proceedings, not because they want to hear particular voice over any other voices. So we also are thankful for our friends who have come here, our dear friends who we invited personally, and most especially the people who came in because of the invitation. So they were really very. This is a first step for Bellas Artes, and I think for the Filipino literary community, no, which is very splintered right now, not in fact factionalized, no. But I guess we just have to sort of, the only request that we have is for everybody to speak up, if you have something to say. Kasi kwentuhan naman siya, we're not panelists will talk at you, no? Neither are we sort of featured panelists, no, who will sort of release pearls of wisdom from our mouths, no? Pearls of wisdom. So my name is Sarge Lacuesta. I'm a writer and an editor. I'm with Carlos Palanca. There's also a writer and an editor. This is Carlomar Daoana, so also a writer and editor. But Carlomar is more of a poet. No? He's published many times. Clinton is a prose writer. He's published fiction. He's published non-fiction and essays. He's with Spot.ph on his commercial sort of writing end. But then it's also sort of the middle end, which is literary and commercial. He's also known as a food critic, no? The sort of most ruthless food critic. No, really, I just want to say, no? So, I'm Sarge. I'm also a writer and editor. So, I guess I'll come from the context of us being the three writers who went to Bataan 2 weeks ago to Las Casas. No? Las Casas de Acusar na yun? Okay. In Bataan. So we were there as the first sort of guinea pig resident writers, no, for Bellas Artes, which has been more concerned with art, no? Art, which we're going to talk about, since Carlomar is also an art writer. In fact, he's been very involved in the, how do you call that scene? It's not necessarily art criticism, but art literature, I suppose, no? So I guess he'll talk about that in a bit, no? Maraming pinag-usap. It's easy now. Art is weirdly enough more accessible than literature now. No more people will know an artist or will be familiar with a Filipino artist than literature. No? Ang Rizal na, more Filipino people will have seen art than actually read Rizal in its real form or remembered Rizal. No? So, which is one of the laments of the writer, which is why sort of we're kind of nervous about this residency. No? We did mention that it's never been done here in residency because Filipino writers are not the residency attending types, no? Unless you're part of the academe, no? In which case you get to take summer off or you get to ask for a leave, no? And it's part of your credits, no? Your academic credits to have joined the residency. In which case you have to go away. No? It's not a part of a writer's life because writers have to make money here. No? It's not like we write something, we put it on a wall and people will buy it, no? Like they do Ronald Ventura's artwork, no? For 8 million. No? So you put it on the wall, somebody will take it and throw it away. No? Our mothers throw it away pa nga, no? So it's that. Make paper airplanes. I'm sure if you're speaking from experience. Pero in fact nga, and I have to be very, I guess it's the first we have to be honest with ourselves. So yun yung framework ng usapan. So please, it's gonna meander, it's going to be boring, but let's hope it will also be exciting. So I think coming from Clinton's point of view na yung tinatapon yung art, di ba, na walang worth, no? That's what you think. Yeah.
Okay. And then another thing I thought we should talk about is the place of the writer and the artist in a world that's as politically charged as it is today. So I think with the writer, I mean the obvious thing is that you can write editorials, you can write you can write reports, you can do it from the point of view of journalism, but then from the point of view as, from your stance as an artist, what can you do? And then for artists, is there something that you can say in art that you cannot do, that you cannot say with words?
In your regular life,
yes,
so to speak.
Something that can be said with art, but then can't be articulated. That's more possible. So,
I think maybe that's a good way to start also, because Manolo Quezon is right beside you. And, you're familiar with writing in the classic idea of writing, and also Liloy Claudio. No, really, no. I just wanna, every time tatawagin ko. But seriously, parang, the idea of writing as persuasion, whether you're writing as stating an opinion or stating a position, which you have done. And you have suffered for it also. But does it profit the writer? Does it? Parang is it something that, like you said, is put on a wall, turned into a paper plane, and thrown away, or thrown, Have you experienced a sort of frustration?
Okay, actually, what interests me is the intersection of the word and the image that we're seeing all around us, particularly in the sort of only avenue that matters at this point, which is on social media. About a couple of weeks ago, I forgot to save his tweet, so I don't remember the name of the person, but it's a young artist, started a hashtag called ArtPH. And it took at least Twitter by storm. I found it remarkable because it was basically a guy who said, share your art, whatever your background, share your art with the world. And you had every sort of aspect of the modern Filipinos there. There were Filipinos who were half Filipino, who were from abroad, who were from Davao and Cebu and Baguio and teenagers and everyone. But what was remarkable about it, besides the flood of really incredible creative stuff that was just pouring out, was how uncurated, how independent of the canon everything was. Of course, it was much more heavily influenced by Japanese design and modern graphic design. There was far less of an interest, or even the sort of token nods people make to the standard images that evoke Filipino-ness. But it also quickly mutated into the political. Soon after that, about 10 days after it, and I was surprised because these things are flash in the pan online. A week
This is all Twitter, right? 100% Twitter.
This is Twitter, which is, I think, is an interesting subculture in itself, but very, very, I think, perfectly designed for the quick sharing of images in particular. Anyway, it had a life of its own. Within a week or 10 days, it was still alive. And then the news of the Marcos Centennial activities came out. And a call went out for, one of the activities was a Marcos poster making contest. And a call came out for people to hijack the effort. And all of a sudden, it became a vehicle for this. Now, I was expecting a huge fight to break out with other artists going, oh, we don't want that, or it didn't happen. It just sort of organically grew. There was a smattering of poetry. And in fact, over several days, you'd occasionally find people saying, I love your pictures, can I share my poem? And so it shows you, I think, the form of writing that is in many ways the most accessible or the most organic in terms of what people are willing to share and that sort of thing. At the same time that this was going on, the general background for anyone else writing prose and particularly non-fiction is the avenues for expression are shrinking. They are shrinking for commercial reasons, they are shrinking for political reasons that affect commercial reasons. It's also, I think, a matter of the audience, which is primarily middle and upper class, devoting its resources to, if you have X amount of pesos on your credit card and now you can buy things online, you will spend it on, I don't know, the New Yorker. I was really shocked to see on...
Oh, the special.
Yeah, the special prices, which means we're an audience for the New Yorker, for all of these, for the Atlantic, promoted on Instagram of all places. So people are reading. People are reading serious stuff. They are not reading our local publications as much at the same time that the print is dying and the newspapers are struggling. So I think in a sense the whole fascinating question is, at the time when Filipino writers are really salivating to express themselves, the avenue for expression is now abroad, therefore limited, although freer in some ways, while your venues for doing so here are tied in with all sorts of other things like the credibility of local media and the way the market has become so segmented that even if you were to place it in sites locally, it may not be the audience that will get it. And so I'm wondering how everyone else is navigating this.
Actually, interestingly enough, you can actually look at the hashtag art page, and see pati yung Marcos na meme that became a meme, that sort of hijacking or hacking the Marcos poster making contest. Actually, I'd like to use that as a base, as another jump off point for the idea of the visual and the text as a very common, in fact, we natin na-realize that we use it all the time when we make a post, whether it's IG or Facebook or Twitter. No? In fact, Twitter post ngayon is just dying to have a photo attached to it now, no? Especially for Pinoys. No? And Pinoys are like growing. I know we have a digital firm, and we know as a statistic that Filipinos are still strong on Twitter, even though Twitter is dying everywhere else, and strong on Instagram also. So this sort of duality na parang kailangan may image, no? And parang kasi I feel also na am I wrong in saying na parang when I say Filipinos are not reading anymore, are they in fact reading, or are they led to read? People in media such as Carlomar or Liloy, you know this. I mean, what is the score? Or what's the score?
I just have some stats. I moonlight with Pulse Asia, so here are our stats on social media. 4 out of 10 Filipinos are online. The majority of them use their cell phones to go online. And then almost all of those people use their cell phones to go on Facebook. So it's almost like 4 out of every 10 Filipinos are on Facebook. Malayo pa ang Instagram and Twitter. So you might think that Facebook can actually change the landscape of politics, but we made a follow-up question. How many of you use Facebook to engage in political discussions? Only 20%. Out of those people say, so like say 4 out of 10 Filipinos are on the internet. Almost all of those are on Facebook, and only 20% of those use Facebook for political discussions. But I don't think that precludes them being able to see Mocha's Facebook site and may masasagap silang Facebook news, fake news, and then fake, and then it just percolates. The effect of that, I mean, we can't measure, but it's so the stats, we don't have the stats to prove the strength of Facebook, although we all know it is quite influential intuitively.
Filipino director for BAP for the Inquirer. Our stats for writers are very dismal, so I don't know if you want to tackle things further. But
we need to hear that. So
okay, most readers will not read beyond 3 paragraphs. They're lucky if they read the 3rd paragraph. It's really all just headlines. So
you know this from the scrolling.
I know this from the stats and just some focus groups that we've done and all. So they scan, they don't read. And oftentimes when people comment, basically they go off on a rant and then I tell them, but your point is made in the 4th paragraph. And it's like, oh, so because they don't. There's also the phenomenon which is unique in the Philippines of free data.
Yeah.
So many times people will not click through the article because.
But the article appears as just text. If it's free data, is it?
No, you have to be. For publishers, you have to be on Facebook instant articles for your, and even then, yeah, for our Facebook instant, you'll increase your reads on Facebook a lot, but most will not read beyond because it's a functional data. If you're reading on a smartphone with a small screen, you're not gonna really go beyond, like 3 or 4 paragraphs. You scan and then you go on. And most people don't even remember the publication or the author they were reading. We did a test and we asked, okay, so then, I can't remember where I read it. Oh, I just read it. Which is why Facebook announced an initiative of making the publisher look more prominent in the feed. Because all the publishers were complaining that, I mean, it's just an endless feed, and after a while you don't remember you don't remember where your content came from. So and they're quite the fact that they're sharing on Facebook, but there's also sharing on what I frequented out when I mentioned dark social and tend to think out what is this dark social. Dark social is dark, since you're on a digital, that dark means that not measurable, unknown. Dark social refers to chat app, refers to Viber, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp. A lot of people are sharing there, but publishers cannot quantify what's being shared. And recently in Malaysia, in fact, they're penalizing, in Malaysia, WhatsApp moderators are being legally obligated to monitor the content on their WhatsApp groups.
What?
Yes, because of the spread of
This is an encrypted messaging platform.
The spread of fake news on WhatsApp in Malaysia and rumors, and it's a government with a checkered history of press freedom. So yeah, it is alarming I think that's actually if you have more than 500 members in your WhatsApp group or something. Which is like in China. In WeChat, in China, beyond a certain number then the government starts monitoring your WeChat conversations if your WeChat group goes beyond a certain threshold. So if you want to be really secret, talk on Telegram or Signal.
Yes.
A question both for Leloy and JV, because I think the perspective we need here is a standard print run is 1,000 copies of a book.
Per book.
A bestseller was a book, the old rule of thumb was 5,000 copies. The circulation of the broadsheets today is pretty much the same, if not less, than the Manila Times was at its height before martial law, which was about 150,000 copies. In other words, in half a century, the paying reading public has not grown, even though the population grew exponentially. Therefore, when I see articles of Leloy's or Clinton's or things like that, if you use the whatever ways people compute, it is potentially as large, if not larger, than what we used to consider success. It's just not trickling down to the publishers or particularly the media owners. But and the fact that it is now scattered around the world is remarkable. Although, again, what is truly remarkable, both in terms of art and in terms of even opinion or anything else, is how the arbiters of credibility and taste are now practically irrelevant. Half of what Leloy will say or what I write can easily be challenged by someone who will not even do half the
As long
work.
as it's within the first 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, so I wanted to know, is this something that's taken into account? Because print has not been a mass media for some time already. And so are we... Yeah, but I mean, those are just packages. But what I mean is like we all come from the perspective that the press is a mass press. I don't think it's been that for since the 90s, and therefore, are we actually? I mean, the flip side is, are we actually living in a golden age of expression and reading and sharing, compared to what used to be our standards and measures of success?
Well, it is a tribal world na rin. We call it a tribal world where there is no single parang monolithic reader. No? Remember the times when there was a reader, parang, dear reader. No? Parang sabi mo, who is that? Who is the reader you're addressing when you say, dear reader? Now, meron bang reader? Pag sinabi ni Mocha, dear follower or dear reader of my post, who is that? Who is the reader? Diba? Yun siguro yung tanong eh. Beyond the, let's say the 3-paragraph limit that's given. Twitter, 140 characters. Pero, meron bang readers? On the other hand, I just wanna, we can go back to this point. But on the other hand, for example, for poets, like Mookie, my wife, and Carlomar, diba? I think you're enjoying a greater readership now? Or no? Kasi filmmakers eh. Lav Diaz can make an 8-hour film and have more viewers than there ever were viewers of a given experimental cinema of the Philippines film back in the 80s, such as Batch 81 or any of the films of the greats, Lino Broca, Ishmael Bernal. Mas maraming viewers si Lav Diaz because he's reached out to the masses and he's also enjoyed all over the world. So what is the reader? Diba? For poetry, diba, bakit biglang, I feel that there is a resurgence. I don't know.
Okay, specifically for, I'll go back first, I'll go to the poetry reader, but with regard to, say, articles on art, that appear every Monday in the Monday papers of Star and Inquirer and Bulletin. Arts and Literature. It used to be like, of course, you had to buy the paper in order for you to get to know the exhibitions, what's happening. And now, because of social media, basically the channels have been stratified in the sense that the gallery will share it, the artist will share it, so on and so forth. And in terms of the readership, the print copy, in terms of the numbers, may have suffered. But I think in terms of how the article, say, of a particular show or a particular spotlight of an artist is being circulated, I think that that's something that's unheard of. Because now you would have other mediating points, such as the gallery itself or other artists who would also share the content. Would the content inevitably be read is a totally different question, but the way it undergoes some kind of a social media prism and is broadcast through this platform that it's just simply unimaginable. Perhaps I think that is something that writers of art may look forward to, touching base with the reader, and this latches on what Manolo said on the readership itself. The newspaper, sorry to say, may have suffered in terms of the number of circulated copies, but Monday, Monday group, yes, and so there. So in terms of readership, I think the art writers or writers about art, lifestyle writers, because that's where I'm coming from, are touching base more with a larger base of readers rather than before when you had the printed copy as the sole basis for you to access the content. Yes.
Yeah, and in fact, I remember pass-on readership as a factor na parang, wow, yung preview magazine, ×2 kasi may pass-on leadership. Iniwan mo sa banyo.
What is the multiplier before?
×3, it was usually 3, ×3. Pass-on readership was ×3. So if you have a magazine, if you had a magazine with 15,000 copies, the actual readership I think was 45,000 because they would include pass-on readership. And that gave advertisers, that gave the magazine an excuse to charge 3 times as much for their front pages and for the advertising. But I don't know if that's functional now because, and this is a quick note, the advertising, the lifestyle publishing industry, shall I use a very loose and idiotic term, no? Is in flux. It's a fluid situation. The magazine which I edit for and write for, Esquire Philippines, just published its last issue, very last print issue, last month, August. No? That was the death of, wala na. No, it's now officially Esquire.ph. Interestingly enough, we can't use Esquire.ph because another company uses Esquire.ph, Esquire Insurance or something like that. So now you have to say EsquireMag.ph, which is weird.
Or Esquire Mag.
Or Esquire, whatever, but I don't even know what my own website is, no? It's EsquireMag.ph, no? Because I did try Esquire.ph and, I almost got into a Ponzi scheme. No, but seriously, so ang daming variables. No? I just also want to take the time to introduce our artists who came all the way from Bataan. No? So the Aquilizans are here. They made a great artwork right there. Isabel and Alfredo are here. No? So, welcome, ma'am, sir. No, and I also want to use this point kasi we shared with the Aquilizans when we broke bread with them in Bataan how envious I am as a writer of artists. We have some artists who's 20 years old, does an artwork. People like you spread the word or write about it. And everybody was reopening and everybody says, wow, 2 million, no? And the next cover is, he's on the cover of an art magazine the next month wearing, head to toe, Jill Sander, no? Or whatever designer clothes, no? Writers can't do that. No? In fact, we're the ones who end up continually writing the articles about them. Trapped in that 3-paragraph rule that Manolo just sort of enlightened us about. Only 3 paragraphs are there. Thank you for that very dark. No, that's darkness.
The advantage of that is we have, this is now the domain of flash fiction. Or Manolo introduced me to a Twitter thread translated from Spanish that was, a very interesting Twitter thread about I don't know if you came across the Twitter feed.
The guy named Manuel.
And then this weird guy in his hotel room opens the door with a key card, like, who are you? And it sort of like goes from there, and it's a Twitter thread, of course.
It's a story.
It's a story written in Twitter thread form. So it's actually serialized fiction.
Which then shifts the challenge to the writer.
Yes.
Kasi kailangan maging interesting yung writer.
And I think that short form for poets are seeing a resurgence because poetry is actually quite compact. I don't think we're seeing the return of epic poetry.
Yeah, not that the Inquirer publishes poetry anymore. It's just one of the.
But I mean, we used to listen to the Inquirer and Rui fought really hard.
Rui, yeah.
But the thing about poetry is it can fit into a tweet. It can be short. It can be. You can set it to music, and then it lends itself to. And the nature of poetry lends itself to visual accompaniment, which is another point I want to bring. I always shock my. We remember a lot of Southeast Asian press alliances, and we get together to compare notes. And they're always shocked when they hear that the Philippines is a 97% TV market in terms of advertising. 97%. In Malaysia, TV is 40 or 30. Yeah, it's actually print is the dominant medium in Malaysia and in Indonesia.
It's also an economic thing. I mean, there's economics at work. There's price and
I think so. The sad thing was I was with the British media critic in one forum, and he said, and his point was, you can tell the economic status of a country by its dominant media. And if you're a poor country, television is a dominant medium. There's a correlation between the two. maybe it has something to literacy or whatever, but there is a correlation between the two. And it might explain also because for 97% television, which is a very, very, very visual medium, it probably cues people, it spills over to social media that people need visual cues or visual aids in social media. And they need video. They need video. And we have to tell our reporters now that it's not enough for you to live tweet the event. I don't care how wonderful your language, how evocative your tweets are of the language, but you need to send, maybe every third tweet you post a photo of what's happening. Or even now, Twitter said, videos have 2 to 3 times the engagement of images. So our print journalists are having to think in a visual frame for many of them first time in their lives. They have to think in terms of, a classic example was when we had a beauty contest event, and the print guy said, "Oh, I took a video," but he forgot that if you're going to be visual, you have to be at the front row and not at the back.
It was a master shot.
It was a very comprehensive shot, I'll put it that way. But
candidates in one shot.
And that far figure there is the candidate. So I told you we're not going to share that on social because we're going to get bashed. So,
but there are 2 points. The first point is, ibig bang sabihin, okay, let's say leadership has shifted, whether we like it or not, to the visual / easily read medium of Facebook. Does that make the Facebook, and so many articles now, so many, it's almost common knowledge that the Filipino is the #1 Facebook guy in the world. Like he knows Facebook, no? Does that mean he became more sort of literate, news literate at the very least? I'd like to also tie that in video because, you have a video show, basta ganun trip. No, and this is ayoko basagin yung trip mo. No, seriously. You have a video show called Basta Ganun Trip. It's a video and it's not a stupid show. You don't talk about lifestyle. You talk about issues. You talk. Do you see that are you gaining an audience or is this where the audience is going? Therefore, is the Filipino actually, are we just sort of underestimating him? Hindi naman siya tanga. Diba? Gusto lang niya ng video.
Baka, I don't know. Actually, the history behind that show is I wanted to do a fresh air for the Philippines. Sit down and talk to creatives for an hour, like what Terry Gross does on NPR. So I'm like, whatever, nobody's gonna want to do this. But then he pitched this anyway to Rapper. And they said, kind of like, let it down in a way by saying, why don't you just do this? Yeah, just do this, go in front of a camera. And we'll let you do interviews every so often, but maybe not an hour, and maybe visual. So maybe there is something to that, because this is something I kind of...
You get feedback, right?
Yeah, I do get feedback, and what's interesting is I don't get trolled on video. So they're very nice to me on video, because I don't know, maybe it's because I take on the demeanor of a teacher, so these are like my condensed classroom lectures. But I don't get trolled so much. And then I have gotten away with like some really complicated stuff. The last video I did, I tried to explain the Keynesian concept of a Phillips curve, the trade-off between inflation and unemployment and employment rates. I tried, and I tried to do it in Tagalog. And I don't think Tagalog. Yeah, and I don't think the viewership dropped. So I think I'm slightly encouraged. Don't know how long this is going to last, but yeah. And I still want to do 1 hour talking to Sarge Lacuesta without any visuals, podcast style, Terry Gross style. But yeah, for now, this is the contribution I can make.
It's heartening,
It's heartening, but I still want to do my 1 hour podcast eventually.
And there are discoveries about the audience.
There are. My one discovery is they're not as mean as I thought they were. Maybe there's something about video that placates these people, because I think you can smile at the tone if you're on video, and you can modulate something you can't do on text. I don't know.
I disagree. Okay. When Leno's advantage is that there is a more defined and compact sort of audience for Rappler. So I think they are more predisposed to. I'll give the contrasting example, which is the overall example is, over the past 20 years, public affairs has been put in a ghetto. The first expulsion was from when most of us were growing up. You had Tino Monson Palma and Randy David and everyone. It was 9 o'clock onwards on free TV. If you notice, 20 years ago, the owners all decided we will shift it to the cable ghetto. That was the first sort of culling. The second is that now that it's on cable, the shows have gotten shorter. When I first started doing a show on ANC, the rule of thumb was a show is an hour, right? Within this was about 2006 or so. By about 2009, their market research had shown that the attention of the audience was half an hour. When I came back in last year, their latest market research was 7 minutes. So there is also the, but then this is a sort of, they have to do it to sort of the least common denominator, more, even if let's say it's ANC, then let's say Leloy has to. Because it's again, I'm sure if you slice and dice, let's say the overall ANC audience, the chunk of it that will listen for more than and absorb more than 7 minutes probably roughly translates to what Leloy gets. It's an overall chunk, but again on TV it's not. Now the other thing that's happening also is, of course, TV itself is under challenge because most of us now can afford Netflix or YouTube, yeah. And again, YouTube is fascinating because if you look at the kinds of numbers that these YouTube shows, not shows, but segments, people will come up like, you know, the supporters of the administration are particularly good at this, and I think the battle has now shifted to YouTube from Facebook, but that's just a hunch. The numbers are gigantic. Watch Tatay Digong scold someone. 2 million.
And they make money out of it.
Yes, we don't know. I mean, most people don't realize that someone is, you know, the guy who's putting this. But it's at the same time as your TV patrol, which is the last national audience left. You were talking about who is the reader. It's still very clear to TV who the viewer is. And the last sort of thing of this is TV patrol. When they say magandang gabi bayan, they really bayan talaga. But it's shrinking. Someone from GMA7 told me about 2 years ago that they said the era of the dominance of free TV has 5 years to go. They were in their planning, and they said after that we will be facing the same crisis that newspapers, that you guys who was pointing to me are going to be facing. And it's because it's also a function of, as more people go beyond the poverty threshold and start entering the middle class, their choices and options for consuming also will draw them away from free TV. So again, I mean, my reaction just was that I think the future and the validation is in things that Leloy is doing. We did an experiment on Spot PH for podcasting, and it did not do well.
Meaning audio only, just to be
audio
clear.
only. Although I do know, and this was one reason why I think Spot was willing to attempt it. There are a lot of Filipinos who are listening to podcasts, but they're probably abroad.
Because of the traffic, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's some demand for podcasting.
But not local content. So it may be again that it's because they're so segmented and so niche and so young that anything of like we would want to talk to is a hard sell. I don't know. And again, when JB is talking about the dark web, it all, I mean not the dark web, dark social.
The dark social, I suppose.
It also means that a lot of bubbling around is happening. Again, I think a lot of the real discussion is retreating from Facebook because of all the trolling and moving to safer spaces like your circle of trust on Viber and WhatsApp, or to a place like watching a video where medyo matino lahat ng mga nanonood and magko-comment. And so there's peer pressure actually to this as well.
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. No, actually, I was wondering if it's also important to bring other factors. Like, for example, the increasing dominance of the market economy. Because, yes, a lot of people are interested in visual arts, but I don't know whether it's purely for speculation. Because I think a lot of people have discovered now that you can actually make a lot of money from buying art, waiting for the prices to go up, without actually appreciating art. That's why, yes, there are more galleries now, but I think people are buying purely for speculation. But you cannot do that obviously with a novel. And also, I think the impact of market economy is also clear in the fact that a lot of people don't have time anymore to read leisure. I don't have much time to read because I'm always in a rush, and I'm just a teacher. But I can imagine others who are living in a more competitive system. They hardly have time to read. That's why their attention span has shrunk. They don't even have time to sleep because of the traffic jams that we're in. No time to relax. And then there's another problem I notice in that it's linguistic. On the one hand, the level of English proficiency is actually declining.
This is a fact.
Yeah, I noticed that the vocabulary of students it seems to be limited. So how much can they read? So limited. I'm not an English teacher, but one time I gave them a poem of Joel Manley Hopkins to read. I was taking for granted that they couldn't understand vocabulary. So I think that might be another reason also. Their level of proficiency is declining. At the same time, you have a vast population that simply doesn't understand English at all. So they're entering into the new world that I don't think they really understand English. And you can notice that some of the people who are trying to post statements online don't really know the grammar at all.
No, that's interesting. Kasi, in fact, I had a discussion with one of an Ateneo teacher also about that, sir. Ano ba yung, what is the, I mean, K-12, etc. Kids are so smart these days. My own son is ahead of his class in common math. Pero in our discussion, came up na, maybe it's not proficiency about math or English or any of that kind of language. Maybe it's proficiency about the interface. You know how to work YouTube, you know how to work Facebook, you know how to work Telegram, you know where to send your message if you want it to be private, encrypted, etc. Which is the interface, and that's how they get things done in their lives. That's how they take control of their lives. In other words, it's more effective than reading. Kasi wala namang ROI, lalo na reading. You talked about the market economy. Yes, certainly, it's the easiest explanation why art is so popular. It makes you look cool, it makes you look rich. Reading doesn't make you anything. It makes your eyes poor. So, no, I mean, that's a very simplistic, but to talk about, in other words, ano ba ang level natin ng literacy, whatever that may mean, di ba?
How about the role of institutions? So with writing, there are just fewer and fewer publishing houses left, and the ones which are left aren't really putting out as many books as they used to. And then with the art world, it's the opposite. I don't know who can.
There's an opening every day
Yeah,
of the week.
yeah.
Just as an example, this is confidential. No, no, I mean, that's a comment. That's a critique. That's a critique. No, we're judging now the Madrigal-Gonzalez Best First Book Awards. No? And this is like the best books in English, let's say, published over a period of 2 years. Kasi, alininan yun, no? English and Filipino. You'd be surprised at how few the nominees are. Nababawasan pa. In other words, na-disqualify pa. Kasi, ay, hindi pala na first book yun. Or hindi pala pwede itong book na to sa ano. So, talagang, I mean, literally, from a stack of books during the first year of the award to like a handful of books. No? So yes, that's print, or that's reading for you.
I'm going to bring in Eric because to represent the museums. Because if you have galleries, which are let's say that galleries are like independent, so museums would be the equivalent of the academia.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the role of museums in all this? Where do museums come from?
Okay. Based on my experience with Eugenio Lopez Foundation, the Lopez Museum and Library, in corporate terms, the Eugenio Lopez Foundation gets their funding from the Lopez Group of companies. So they are required within a year to mount at least 2 exhibitions for the Eugenio Lopez Foundation to be able to sustain itself. Siyempre, nandiyan na rin yung tax breaks for the entire Lopez Group. I don't know the intricacies of it, but every company that's affiliated under the Lopez Group of companies are required to donate a certain amount for the museum to mount an exhibit. So for the past 17 years, yung exhibit na Lopez, first it was three exhibitions a year, and then for the past 5 years, I think it became 2 exhibitions per year. And then for it to sustain its visibility in the art community, hinati yung exhibition. So for visual arts under the museum and library exhibitions, pag-mountain sila ng separate exhibition just for the library.
How much does each exhibition cost?
That's confidential, sorry.
One interesting point is like we're here talking about there's an unspoken assumption here that we're talking about literature in English, and you brought up the point. And I agree with you. I've had to work on hiring new reporters, and it's like hiring for a call center. You will not hire anyone if you expect perfect English. What you do is you pick someone whose English is maybe 80% good, and just hope that your copy editor catches stuff. And more often than not, they don't. But so the Philippine news agency is hiring also. I'm sure. But it's systematic in the industry, and but yet I have a feeling that if many of them were to write in Filipino, a lot of the proficiency level would increase. And I'm also thinking of the success of, I'm looking at the success of indie film, for example. Just the other day, the first trailer of the sequel to General Luna was dropped, was born. And that was a breakout success. So there is, I think, a possibility that we may, I'm not that plugged into the scene anymore. What's literature in Filipino looking like? Is it doing better than literature in English? Are people consuming that more? Because again, in ASEAN countries, like for example in Malaysia or Indonesia, there is a thriving, you have to go into their bookstores and there's a whole, English section is kind of small. There's a whole section for Bahasa Indonesia, Bahasa Melayu. And they're regional, they recently had an award, I think, for one of the Indonesian writers for best in Bahasa Indonesia. And we have something similar to that here. Interestingly enough, you mentioned Malaysia. No? Malaysia does, and they call it a success story. You call it, it does regulate. No? It does regulate its language. In other words, they have a department, no, called the Dewan Bahasa dan Pustaka that really regards only works in Bahasa Melayu as part of their national literature. Ganun katindi. Matindi yun. No? It means basically that they've marginalized other languages, which is okay because English wasn't a Malaysian language. No? But my point of view is, and we're going to go into English as a transplanted language now, my point of view is that English is a Filipino language. It is part of our culture. It was taught to us quite literally by the people who colonized us. No? Just as Spanish was kind of taught to us. No? So, there's that difference. Pero now, lumalabas na talaga na kung nagsusulat ka sa Tagalog, kung Tagalog ang post mo, or even, mas malaki audience mo. TV Patrol. Diba? I suppose. Does that mean also na tribe lang talaga ang English speakers? That we cannot really change the world, or we can't really impose our, my boss, Christine Fonacher, and her boss, is here. No, and to talk about Summit, diba? The publisher Summit, diba? Summit doesn't have Filipino Tagalog novels, romance novels. That's interesting because it was sort of determined what the tribes were. No, we have romance. Yes, in Taglish, and that's Kit Nakaba, who should be national artist, no? Who did so much. In other words, merong tribalism that exists, and we see it now, di ba, na yan that's how they paint elites, di ba? That's how you paint a big target on your head if you speak English, or if you make a post in English. So, what of that, di ba? And the audience, let's say, for example, like Inquirer. You do have a Tagalog, of course. Actually, no. Again, what people forget is that part of the Bandera Inquirer is part of the Inquirer group, and it's the #1 tabloid in the Visayas and Mindanao. And the language changes are very different. It amuses me sometimes how we can get a Bandera Inquirer story written in Tagalog. If we post that by itself on the Inquirer Facebook, we get calls. People call us. Like, why is this tabloid thing doing on my feed? So what we do is we get said story, we write an English headline and an intro copy, and it goes viral. So I asked the timely fan, what is it about that? We cast it in English and suddenly it's so acceptable to you. Oh, I just don't want to be seen reading Tagalog in English. I was like, but it's trashy either way, but if it's trashy in English, at least it's acceptable. I'm like, okay, language as social marker, Sorry.
It's like the Titanic song. They use the Titanic.
Oh, my heart will go on. It's like my favorite anecdote about this woman who was going on and on about how bad Filipino tabloids were. And he was reading Ola, a Spanish tabloid. And I'm like, okay. Back to the rift between English and Filipino, I think also, Carlomar as a poet, malakas ang labanan. No? May labanan between English and the Filipino, just call it Filipino na magalit kung sino or hindi, diba? Na doon mo na hindi yung rift, no? Meron talaga, right?
In terms of literature in general, of course, you have a group which is Kira that's so influential and that would really, organize themselves into a group, and they would have workshops, regular workshops, so on and so forth. In terms also, like there is a Komisyon Wika ng Filipino, for instance, that would also also under Sir Rio, that would really send out writers in Filipino to different parts of the Philippines in order to discuss certain issues about the Filipino language, which of course we don't have a counterpart of that in terms of English. Although the workshops, at least like the Silliman workshop and the UB workshop, would still have a strong presence of writers in English. But there is, of course, some kind of, I don't know, like in terms of riff, I don't think it was as intense as, say, in the 60s, and that it would like signify your nationalism if you wrote in a certain language. But today, as a writer in Filipino, as a poet in English, I also feel that kind of, not naman pressure, but some kind of like a kind of questioning, why am I writing in English? Which, and given my background, I graduated from a public school, elementary and high school, so on and so forth, and it's simply a historical accident because apparently I went to UST, there was a strong mentor, Vida de Malanga, who was one of the foremost writers in English, hence I started writing in English. But had it been different, of course, it would have been a totally different scenario. So you would have very well-placed writers, both in English and in Filipino, who are in the academy, who are mentoring young writers, and inevitably they will spread out and also influence the succeeding generation of writers. So I think there's that continuity in terms of the transference of craft, technique, but of course, once you speak about the Filipino language in general, hindi maiwasan talaga like issues about the social, political spheres, they're so implicated, as opposed to say English, na in terms of engagement in that kind of, I'm talking about poetry specifically, is not as, the poetry in English is not as burdened as, say, poetry in Filipino, in terms of that kind of awareness, in terms of this socio-political spheres.
I wanted to ask Carlomar, what is it that they read in Tagalog? Okay, you have a novel on one side, or even a short story on one side, and poetry on the other. What would people read more? The reason I ask is because being an anthropologist, I spent some time in the field. I chose to stay among farmers. And every time I would read my notes or read a book, the farmers would tell me, "Kawawa ka na, lupot mo." Because they're used to watching things on TV or hearing stories. In other words, Filipinos are, I think, perhaps I should not essentialize. I think many Filipinos are still largely oral. They're not oriented to print because it's just too lonely. Mag-isa ka lang. So I was wondering kung print, hindi lang gusto na mabasa. Which they can share easily, but how can you share a short story or especially a novel? What is that advantage? You can recite it.
I want to talk about riffs because I don't think the riff is just between English and I still refuse to call it Filipino, Tagalog.
I use Filipino because I will also mean other languages.
Yeah, okay. But the assumption that you speak Tagalog and you speak to the nation is absolutely false as well because like the riff there is in terms of registers. A lot of people, especially who write like that kind of elevated Tagalog that you see, at least in my field, Zeus Salazar thinks he speaks to the nation, but he writes in an elevated Tagalog that nobody would understand. And a lot of the institutions of higher learning in the Philippines have tried to mainstream Tagalog and turn it into the national language, and they have not succeeded. The reason why Cebuanos are now literate in Tagalog is because of the Summit romance novels. So I asked people there, are there still novels in Cebuano? They say, no more, because everybody now speaks Tagalog because of the Summit romance novels. In Mindanao, a lot of people there there still don't, Moros, a lot of people there still don't think they're Filipinos, but they speak Tagalog because they were watching Wawawi in the 2000s. So the success of the nation building project, the linguistic nation building project, is actually more of a commercial success and a kind of intellectual success that was pushed on us by the kind of Diliman nationalist consensus of the 1970s.
Just an announcement.
There's beer here. You just go in there. There's a lager and IPA because fist fights are gonna happen. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Manolo.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to react to both. I think the insight of it being primarily oral is the key of it. I mean, if we're giving the example of General Luna, Nelo is talking about mass media. Of course, the language is propagated through mass media. It is 15 or 10 to 15 years ago, I remember in Cebu, I went to the University of San Recoletos, and the priests there were telling me they were experiencing their first generation of native Tagalog speaking Cebuanos. And it was because of Marimar. It was not because of the novel, it was because of Marimar. The whole city would shut down for Marimar. You also, I think what was very interesting was to see the president now, because he, I think, is two things, both a representative of a specific generation that we thought had gone out to pasture but now has a second wind, but is also a very good exemplar of the reality on the ground that Metro Manila people.
And it's kind of colonialism. I mean, obviously, right?
No. Look at his way of expression, and our capacity for understanding spoken English is much wider, I think, than people assume. You see it in the afternoon shows. You see it in the president's use of English. You see it in the mixtures that people use in ordinary life. But it's very different from the written. Okay, but it is, which tells you that the influence of the writer now is behind the scenes. It is in the script writer. And it's also where the academic, that's why all the lobbying that went for General Luna was because that's the battleground now. It will never be in a book anymore. It will not be in the publication of Revolt of the Masses. It will be in who gets to give the facts to the scriptwriter for the film. It's also happening where the retreat from AM radio, and then it was Gan Badoy who came on this insight. Remember when Aldoy and Pepeng happened, there was a generation gap in terms of reaching the public. Everyone at the time, I think 30 and below, could not be reached by AM because no one young listens to AM or has an AM. Right? So that's why Gang had to force open an FM station to reach all the stranded kids who only have FM on their phones. And this was, what, 10 years ago? And if you look at the talk shows, you have the very old-fashioned, bombat style of banat ng banat on AM, which is increasingly geriatric. But there is a new and often, I think you saw the first glimmerings of Duterte type thought on the FM talk shows in 2009 onwards. Then on AM, AM sort of got stunned because it was not going by the usual route. So my main point was that the missing link in terms of how we are looking at perceptions of language is that it has to be judged in terms of the spoken word, both in terms of the power that English still has to convey authority, even though people may not fully understand it, but I do think they understand a lot more. It's very interesting that a lot more people pay attention to the president, not just because he's entertaining, but also I think he has a particularly Filipino English lawyerly way of expression that is evocative to people in ways that may be more moving than Filipino is for his peers. But at the same time, when he really wants to make a point of either excluding the elite or reaching out directly to the people, he will switch to Tagalog. And then if he really wants to do a super secret you and me language, he will slip into Cebuano or Bisaya, and then it's even more cool.
This kind of code switching is, this is an art, this is a language in itself, in a sense. No? And you're right, the president does use it to his advantage. I think he uses it instinctively. It's just his mayoral ways, no? As a mayor. And it weirdly, or hindi mas weirdly, it goes back to video. No? When you see Tagalog or whatever whatever language is being synced. No? Like my son himself, his classmates speak English because alam mo naman dito sa Pilipinas, no? And some of his classmates are not Filipino, they're sons and daughters of expats, for example. But he knows Tagalog because he watches Mikey Bustos. No? Mikey Bustos is not, in fact, living here. He's a Canadian, ba? Canadian. No? So it comes from all over, and all of a sudden, the barriers are broken down. And you're right. Where does poetics lie? Diba? There's no longer poetics or the idea of having to form a group such as Mira against the green. The idea of forming a group is, in that sense, this is also probably why there are no English-speaking groups to form. Yes.
I was just going to come in and say, parang the interesting thing about the president, and a lot of even Filipino jokes, is that when you start off in English, and then you do the code switch to Tagalog, and then yun yung punchline. And when you switch to Tagalog, it becomes stronger. It suddenly says, so the person will say, I am reading a teleprompter right now, and then ito yung totoo. So suddenly the truth comes in that term, in the switching from English to Filipino.
So all of a sudden,
it's not about one language, it's about the switch between one language to another.
And it's okay, all of a sudden ba, parang, therefore, English is, whether we parang subconsciously taken as a sort of archness, no? About parang, I'm writing it in my head, so when I speak in English, it's very formal, it's court language. Pero pag nag-Tagalog na ako, ito na talaga yung totoong feeling, kaya pinapanata na kita, di ba, parang gano'n. No, and that's not related to any region. I mean, tama ka nga na, kahit sa Davao, it's very Tagalog.
There's I remember the Tanghalan Ateneo's take on Midsummer Night's Dream, and they used that code switching to great effect because Titania and Oberon spoke in English and Pop Manila was speaking in Tagalog. But I was going to ask if you're talking about poetics and we're talking about visuals, and there is a medium where poetry and visuals unite, and that's theater. And you're seeing a resurgence. It took Gibbs a lot of lobbying, but he finally got a theater section in the Inquirer. And I asked him, and I asked him, like, how's it doing? He said, I have no lack of material. I mean, there are productions left and right, and then suddenly PETA won amongst his award recently. So, theater, I think, has you're surprised because theater, what can theater do against television, right? And yet theater is holding its own, I think, in many...
In fact, this is like PETA itself, they have evergreen productions, forever, and that change, that sort of mutate and evolve, theater in the Philippines, and that's weird because there's a Virgin Lab Fest also, which is a sort of the MMFF of theater. It's so bad, it's so bad comparison. But, and theater classically has always been our political sort of platform when we want to say something. Yes. Yes.
Some observations. I'm not in the writing industry. I'm a painter, and I used to teach high school art for 2 years before I became freelance. But I don't know, it's like when I think of images and reading, and we say that more and more youth have this disdain for books. Because I'm the eldest among three siblings, and my youngest brother doesn't like reading at all. On the other hand, I love reading. My memories of reading, like when I was like 5, and then I borrowed 3 books a day. And you're talking about the image, and the images I associate with reading are very pleasant ones because my dad would read to me. So I don't know if that's such a big thing, how you introduce grassroots yan eh. So, which brings into mind questioning how schools introduce reading to kids. Because observing these high school kids, parang they only associate reading with requirement, with... And school, I hate school. I hated school. So, I think it's such a big factor na paano ba? And when I came from Maria Montessori, so that was such a good foundation. And they would invite animated readers. So talagang yung foundation for reading, na it became like art for me, like a different world when you jump in. And it only helps me when I'm about to do a show or some pieces. I really immerse myself in reading. I take notes, I love to diary. So, yun eh, yung schools talagang laki ng influensya. And it's not, I don't think it's time. Because, like what Sir said, kung people are busy, I'm never caught without a book when I'm commuting. Kasi lines, you're always waiting. And medyo, diba, you know when you're not always comfy to put out your iPad, baka manakawat ka. So, diba, it's not time eh. Parang so much people spend on Instagram curating their outfits before they eat, fixing the flat lay. Like, may oras kayo. So, diba? I guess it poses a challenge how we're able to integrate these different mediums because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers. And it can only make the weave richer if we can work together and find ways to educate, I guess.
Just before you launch into that, I had a little question myself. So we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I was very curious about how, especially someone like you who's navigating between writing in, should I say Filipino or Tagalog? Navigating between writing in English and writing in Filipino. And we were talking about sort of the different, both code switching as well as sort of a different mode of writing. So I'm curious about those of you who write between languages and how you operate across them.
Maybe we can answer.
Yeah.
I just want to have actual educators react to what you said. My son goes to Maria Montessori also. Okay, but Carlomar, you're involved very much in the interface between reading and looking at visual reading, and you're a teacher yourself. So I guess you're in touch with students more at that age, although you teach in college. So I don't know. Yeah.
Alright, specific to say archiving, of course, or like into visual arts and all of this. Much of my material would come from foreign or written by American or European art critics. But there are, in my syllabus specifically, of course, I would put there works by Patrick Flores, by Alice Guillermo, who I consider really titans of archiving. So in terms of putting there, possibly not an art criticism piece written in Filipino, but or an ekphrastic piece written by in Filipino, but a piece that is written by a Filipino author. And it's not just about representation and so on and so forth, but I think it's really because it fits into the design and into the discussion, so on and so forth. So it's not, I don't feel compelled to to put there simply because I have to introduce a Filipino author into my reading list, for instance.
On the subject of teaching, actually I want to ask my wife Muki, who's a poet and a teacher also. No, because I don't know what the kids are like. Like your brother is, how old is he?
He's on his way to first year sa Lasal.
So first year college. So that's already like college, right?
I handled high school kids before. And
Yeah.
ayaw rin nila mag-Tagalog because it's associated.
It's associated with like the masa.
And recently I went to Bacolod because my mom's from Bacolod. And I had a niece, she's 7 years old in St. School, Bacolod. And we were talking about, I asked her, why don't you speak Ilonggo? Kasi all the rest of the kids growing up, kaya ako natuto mag-Ilonggo because all my cousins would speak Ilonggo. And she'd always reply in English kahit ini-Ilonggo ko siya. And then she said na, because in school it's not encouraged. We're all encouraged to speak English. And when we speak Ilonggo, we get penalties. So imagine the association.
That's how a lot of us grew
The
up.
conditioning na then we carry that till we're adults.
More on that rift between, it's a rift, no? It's a war between English and Tagalog. But do you have experience like, with the younger generation and how much or how little they read?
Because I taught in Taft last term, and I taught kids, I saw you there, and I taught kids who were about the same age as your brother, and they really, there's no culture of reading. But as an educator, I teach literature, so definitely I have pushed literature. So there's really, how do you reach out? It's the educator's job to really reach out to, let's say, if you have attention span problems with your students, how do I create a curriculum, or how do I come up with a list that will engage them? And my answer to that was, how do I crystallize, let's say, poetry? The kids don't like reading poetry, they find it very intimidating. So what medium can I find to engage them? The answer was flash fiction. So that's entire story in 500 words, using an average of 500 words with all the elements of storytelling there. So flash fiction actually marries the tenets of poetry and the tenets of fiction, and they can handle it. So I taught kids as old as your brother, and I resolved that issue by teaching them medium that was easy to write and was easy to read.
I'm just gonna push onward to the issue between languages, because even on Facebook, I have some friends who post a bilingual post and feel compelled to translate their bilingual. They put little parentheses explaining what the Tagalog words were, as though they were speaking to some UN congregation. No? They're putting out their post, which I feel is the way they think. No? That English is a global language, therefore it should be spoken in global society. And Facebook is global society in a way, no? But it's only when we're writing a film when we find ourselves sort of cramped when we do English. And there was an English language film just last year at the MMFF, no? Saving Sally, which received quite a number of sort of critical comments about why are they speaking English. At the same time, there's also another who was so brave for somebody to write a film like that, because Rihanna, the actress, I forget the actress, Rihanna, spoke Aquilizan English, which is sort of, I suppose like the English. You saw it, yeah? And I wonder what you guys think of that. Like, you're from English, you write in English, but you've written a film.
I write in English because I can't write in Tagalog.
And that's a great reason, because some people write in English because they think they need to master English.
Yes. But then I really think that whenever I enter a room, whenever I'm talking to someone, I have to decide which English am I going to use, which accent am I going to use. And then if you have had that problem, it's like, am I going to talk to this person in English or Tagalog? Ay, waiter pala siya, he might think that I am. So, we really, in our knowledge of English, most of the time when let's just say, most public intellectuals, when they're speaking Tagalog, they actually write it in English in their minds first, and then translate it into Tagalog.
How do you know that? No, but that's a valid.
No, but that's what I think. I think that most people still think in English, and but then they feel that they need Tagalog to reach the mass.
They need to. That's condescending act.
Ako, my native is Taglish. So, what I do is just, so I can't speak straight Tagalog. I end up,
English is, Philippine English.
it's Filipino English also. It's Filipino English also. But I think most of, but I disagree a little with Clinton. Maybe they're translating, but actually their native is probably still Taglish. Even the public, even the public interaction.
It's not a proper language.
Even Taglish not, but I think it is a proper. I make a, like, when I do video, I make it a point to do it in Taglish. In my native.
Natural.
In my natural, the way I talk to people face to face. And I think we should celebrate that a little bit, that kind of hybridity. With respect to English, everybody loves the language, but nobody loves it for the right reasons. I think they love it because it kind of makes you global, makes you high class. But there are other ways to love the language, the punchiness of the language, the short syllables of the way Orwell loved it. He loved the short syllables of the Germanic words, which you can then juxtapose with the Norman French, which creates wonderful rhythms, which I personally, maybe because I don't have the facility, I can't do that rhythm with Tagalog because it's too multisyllabic. Unlike Bahasa Indonesian, which actually they reduce the syllables. One thing we should think about is actually... Yeah, but there are ways to romance this language, and I think, the generation of Nicoquin, Greg Brillantes, they were already doing this, thinking about, Filipino English and the beauty of Filipino English. I think one broader thing that needs to be talked about is really we have an uncomfortable relationship with our American heritage because a lot of people take it for granted, but they don't really, but academics don't theorize it because it's kind of like verboten, it's, the Americans are evil. So sometime in the 1960s, 1970s, you had historians like De La Costa and Nicoquin made us comfortable with our Spanish heritage. I think it's about time for scholars like in this century to make us comfortable with our American heritage, and and part of that conversation has to be like how do we love the English language as part of our national heritage.
Okay, before I move on, I want to say I agree with you. Because I've heard this, I tend to agree with you, but I've heard this intellectual talk, no? And when it's such a stilted, and the idiom, it feels English that was translated, which leads me to the question of, why don't we speak in Taglish? Diba? An entire nation called Singapore was built on a sort of weird,
I was about to ask, I heard there was some sort of academic movement to declare Taglish formally as Creole.
As Creole.
I don't know how that has progressed.
Yeah.
I
haven't heard it,
so I don't know what the criteria is.
Yeah,
When does a language move from pidgin to Creole?
What's how do you categorize a language?
Because Chavacano is a language.
It's a language,
right? But it is a Creole of Spanish. And my mother is a native Spanish speaker, and she freaks out when she hears Chavacano.
Really?
Because
in her alta.
because to a native Spanish speaker, it sounds really weird. It's like English without any tenses.
Oh, I see.
Imagine if English had an English speaker was speaking and he was always using the present tense for past, future, and everything. And the declensions are thrown off. So also,
that's interesting. Do you have any questions from anybody or comments? I suppose we're gonna wind down soon. Yes, sir.
yeah, it's on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Good evening to everyone. I teach filmmaking at Benil. I'm a filmmaker and a writer. I'd like to talk, going back to your point about language. My primary language is English, even though I'm Ilonggo, I'm from Bacolod. But just I guess some observations about the language used in itself. When my wife and I speak English on the street, when we walk, we're talking to each other, people tend to turn around and look at us as if we're aliens. So, but of course, again, my Tagalog is pretty bad. So I do try to speak in Tagalog when I deal with people. And whenever I'm in a taxi, the driver will always ask me, "But are you from the US?" And I'm like, so you still get those comments. So I'm wondering about the evolution of language and things like that. And when going back to your point about saving Sally, I'm not so sure about the intention of the scriptwriter, whether the scriptwriter knew to write in Tagalog or not. But my guess is marketing-wise, probably because they wanted an international market. That's why they wrote it in English also. So, and one last thing, the coding of Duterte. As a teacher, I realized it does work because you do shift from English, and then suddenly you'll swear in Tagalog or in Ilonggo, and then they're all gonna start laughing. And so he knows what he's doing. It's very deliberate and a master of getting the audience to, it's a theatrical flourish, and just a way to connect with people, as you said. And I have certain students who are also in Ilonggo in my class, and I started talking to them in Ilonggo also, so I understand what you mean about the secret. So on a smaller scale, I realize it is connected to that bigger picture of what he's doing, for better or for worse.
It's with the whole of the thoughts on the image and reading and storytelling, communicating. Recently, I found the really, for me, a good example of how an artist read all three together with social media. Because Darren Aronofsky's coming up with a new film, and what intrigued me, what led me to getting to know about the film was a poster that James Jean, a graphic artist, came out on his Instagram feed, so which led me to the Instagram feed of the movie Mother, and then they also did public art installations to promote the film. At the same time, I went to Darren Aronofsky's feed, and there were actually really long captions that had pictures of places and spaces that are sort of allusions or clues to the content of the film. So I don't know. My question, I guess, to the writers, is it something that scares you, challenges you? How do you plan to approach this progressive way of communication, and where do you fit into it in Philippine society wherein we're a bit slow, I really think, because even with art, you go to openings, not a lot of people care about the content. They're there to take selfies or drink beer with their friends. So, not just the art fair actually, but so it's like this whole glamorous thing, but then is it just a fad, or people might just be there to invest because it's a commodity. But as writers, yun yung question that I pose, and how do you intend to maybe work with thespians or visual artists?
Well, I think it's actually when you're under threat, your instinct is to curl up into a ball and fight with your neighbors who are curling up into balls as well. So you're finding that as the audience is shrinking in many ways, the tribes are getting clearer and more ferocious in their arguments because they're fighting for a smaller and smaller space. The opposite is shown by these paths that are opening up, right? Particularly with film or the mixture of music and the spoken word, and you're finding a very rich sort of. But again, the ultimate question is this: the bookstores are all closing, or they're reducing inventory. Yet when Neil Gaiman comes here, he is mobbed. Now, is he mobbed relatively speaking, meaning it's a mob by Manila standards, but really a very tiny thing by, I don't know, Singapore standards, let's say? That's where our sort of inward lookingness doesn't even give us an opportunity to gauge how alive our culture is. We all have hunches. Our hunch is art is more accessible than it ever has been. Not just in terms of it being commercially available like when you go through the mall, but I think for the first time you have lines in the National Museum in living memory. You have repertory is no longer alone. Now there's still a heavy bias for recycled Broadway, right? and that's probably making the big bucks, but there is no shortage of people reserving space in the cultural center, the little theater and that sort of thing. The groups may be may be small, but enough to sustain. I'm noticing that with theater productions. The cross-fertilization is perhaps happening more in terms of music and the poets, and not even in terms of the books, or reimagining the book for a new era, reimagining the book for the gadgets. So I think that's where, and because it's becoming very ideological in terms of the battles happening among the writers. Even in language, I mean, in language, there's a lot of time spent over whether you write it Filipino or Filipino, and it's very easy to get sucked into that. But what I noticed is, and I'll just close with this observation from former president of UP, who was Donong Limenso. And I was asking him, look, Nick Joaquin said that Manila stopped being a Tagalog city after World War II. So I said, if that is the case, and as someone who writes about politics, it also explains Arsenio Lacson. He's Ilonggo, and he becomes the first elected mayor of Manila. Anyway, the question is this. Manila, the center of government and culture, mass media and everything, stops being a Tagalog city. Why do we not see more of an Ilonggo influence or a Cebuano influence in Tagalog itself? Because the whole choir being preached to is not Tagalog. And he said, you see it in the grammar. He said, Tagalog or Filipino, Tagalog, whatever grammar in the capital has diverged from traditional Tagalog in the Tagalog provinces in the grammar, because there you see the Bisaya influence. Pared down, fewer tenses, fewer changes here and there. And he says, and he was saying at the time, and this was 20 years ago in an airport conversation, he said, it's a fundamental and yet very Filipino sort of subversive influence on the language. Now, dealing with writers as I did for 6 years, where we had to write in Filipino and in English with multiple audiences in mind. I did notice, because we had a big cadre of really passionate Filipino writers, that what I noticed was their English suffered from what I can best describe as a lack of idiomatic flexibility. It's very, it was learned English. The Tagalog suffered from an academic remoteness. It was beautiful, but never conversational, which made it very difficult from that particular purpose of communicating to the public. Which is why in most cases, to close on the note that was observed earlier, people will appreciate a speech most when the person delivering the speech sets aside their prepared text. And I think that says it all.
Any other views or comments? Yes, Christine.
It's interesting that you've begun to speak of Taglish as a Creole. And I was going to say that, and I think this conversation is happening in many areas all over the world, especially in countries that used to be colonies as well. I remember sitting in to a discussion much like this in the Caribbean, and they were talking about also how to navigate the colonial language, the language of their colonial masters versus their native languages. But the bridge that they found between it was Creole. And they were fighting to legitimize they were already they already think of their native language, of course, as a legitimate language, and the colonial master's language is a legitimate language for literature. But what they're fighting for now is the legitimacy of Creole as a language for literature. Now this, I don't know why this conversation, it hasn't happened sooner in the Philippines. Now me, as a magazine editor, one thing that I've noticed, and which really riles me up, and which I also wonder why we don't talk more about, is that, I still get submissions with, of course in English, as I work for English language magazines, but whenever there are Tagalog passages, they are, first of all, italicized as foreign words, and then translated. And this was taught to me, of course, in high school and in grade school, because I was being taught a language. They were saying that if you're going to talk, if you're going to write in Filipino, it being foreign to what we're doing here, you have to denote it as language foreign. But magazines written in the Philippines for a Filipino audience, why do we have to translate it? Why do we have to denote the Filipino words as being foreign in the Philippines? And then why do we have to assume that everybody else does not speak Taglish? Which is, I think, for me also, I consider myself a native Taglish speaker. How do we assume that that's not so? But first of all, that is the most inelegant way to do it, really. And we even have, but in Summit, the style guide says that we have to strictly italicize the Filipino words and leave alone the English words, which presents such a dilemma when you're writing when passages in Taglish. Every other word can be in Filipino and English. It's just unreadable. And I think, again, I rebel against it by either not italicizing the whole thing or italicizing the whole thing. I treat Taglish, in other words, as a language in itself. It helps readability, and I think it pays respect to the language. Well, sorry, I got lost there, but that's my little rebellion. There's how I either denote it as a language, as a foreign language in itself or not. But one thing I will not do, and I think I'm alone. I think I'm alone here as an editor. Is I will not translate. I will not offer a translation in Tagalog or in English for a Taglish passage. I think that's just.
No, that's a no.
Neither did Rizal in Orquitano.
Neither did Italicized.
Not italicized.
Neither, I think, anywhere else. I don't think.
Sorry, I just want to say, and that's why film is making so many successes. I mean, is there a film style guide, diba, na you have to sort of speak in straight Tagalog or whatnot? None. And yet, when we write, there's a sort of invisible editor, no? Global editor, looking over our shoulders. I mean, you as Colin, you feel this?
Editor? I feel it with the older generation. Because, we were talking about in pen and ink, and we were doing this 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago. It was one of the early editorial decisions that had to be made. What is this business of italicizing? And we didn't italicize. When we did the government style guide 2 years ago, that was what we put forward as the rule. It is not foreign, But the older generation, I hate this thing in the columns where they will insert a usually lousy English translation of a Filipino thought or concept.
Traditional Filipino dish, adobo. No, but really, also in fiction, right? Just very quickly. Philippine line, Calamansi. You should do a book on lousy English translations. No? So, yeah, and you just
The absolute worst was because Inquirer.net had to write for an international audience. So we had to do a lot of, because we weren't doing it until we did get an email from a very befuddled Norwegian that I'm really interested in the Philippines, but what does this word mean? So I'm like, okay. So we had to translate jeepney, and we were at a loss in the office. Finally, I called up a friend who worked in BPA, the German news agency. Surely the European news agencies had come up with this one. And she laughed and says, we have a translation, but you're not going to like it. And I was like, try me. Our style guide says jeepney is translated as minibus. And I'm like, what? I mean, you know, minibus for me is a coaster or something like that. It is not a jeepney. But this is why, if we use that translation, our Filipino audience would be like, absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to say insert because we never talked about fiction here. No? In fiction, bahala ka na. And yet, we have such stilted examples of fiction, no? Where the words indeed, the words that we never use, no? Are so often used, no? There's a lot of stilted, like, bad words, no? Because now, code switching can be done irresponsibly, I suppose, and with great.
No one actually begins sentences with "Good Lord."
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Also, I think we don't have the language for a lot of the fiction that we want to be writing, or that we need to be writing. We have the language to write about the Filipino pastoral. And this is one of the short stories that just appear over and over in the Palanca judging. It's set somewhere in the Filipino countryside where Mita hats, and then there's Don something, and then there's Mr. something, and then there's some coming of age na may sexual innuendo na ewan. And it's like NVM Bienvenido Santos mashup. French Arsenal mashup. Yeah. But then we don't really have a language to talk about the stories of the middle class, the upper middle class. We don't have a language to talk about the fiction that we could be writing about their daily lives. We were talking about this in the car. We have New Yorker fiction that appears.
New York, it's always in a Starbucks.
It's always in Starbucks. And then it's a Filipino setting, but then it's New Yorker fiction.
There's a breakup in Starbucks.
Otherwise, it's another kind of fiction where you always open your eyes or wake up in the first sentence. I opened my eyes. I'm sure we're all guilty of that, so I am.
If I remember it correctly, merong specimen book from the American era na galing kay Manolo. It's from the Bureau of Printing. Recently, I've been researching about yung typography in Philippine design. So, if I remember it correctly, walang rule for italicization pertaining to Filipino words. Meron, pag naglagay ka ng French word or other European words. But for Filipino words, especially mga proper names, wala. So
basically, tay-tay lang talaga.
Oo. And it's a formal specimen book from the Bureau of Printing, circa 1905.
That's interesting.
So, lahat ng rules doon pertaining to typography, we're still using it now. So imagine that.
Okay. Before I end, wow, haba ng kwentuhan, grabe, I can't believe it, thank you. Before I end, does anybody want to make a last statement or just a little observation, from anywhere? Yes? Yeah. You were mentioning that people don't have time anymore. But what Dr. Jacinta did mention, that was his point.
People seem to have time for Instagram.
Yes.
I think I did a little experiment recently. I really dialed down the notifications on my phone. As in, I looked at all the apps and I basically muted most of them. And you will be surprised how much time you suddenly have. It is just irritating because I was reading a good long form piece on my phone this morning, and then someone chimed in on Messenger.
And it broke my train of thought. So I think what basically happens is long form reading is prey to a zillion interruptions. That's why I like to do my reading on a Kindle because there are no notifications on the Kindle. It's like, somebody has said na, we used to go to the internet to escape life, right? Now we escape the internet. Now we escape the internet, no? But that's a very important point also because, yes, I think that's the main source of this distraction that everybody seems to overlook. Where talagang they just, it's just part of life. Now we've split our life into this kind of thing. We spent more than an hour and a half, I think about 2 hours here right now, just talking about a lot of things. And we seem to have enough time to talk about them. It's because we didn't look at our phones for that moment. Or that I hope that the conversation is also interesting enough. Now, can you imagine that you could have this conversation every day, no? If you just stop looking at your phone. Yeah, and there's a study that says, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the authority on this, that Filipinos spend 4 hours a day on Facebook. That's just Facebook, not even the internet. Yeah, I'm sure underreported by now. Because we did a check, and I actually sent something weird in the numbers. They actually warned me that the numbers don't add up to how many hours a day I spend doing this and that. So the numbers are lampas ng 24 hours. And how is it happening? Well, people are doing 2 or 3 things at once. They're watching something on Netflix or chatting with someone on Messenger, and you guys, they all overlap. So, and what suffers? They said people are just sleeping.
Thank you, everybody, and I hope the Kwentuhan continues, and I hope you learned something. Well, I certainly learned a lot. And thank you, especially to our panelists and friends who joined us here for the first time, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what to talk about. It was really a great conversation. So let's give each other a huge hand. I think the beer is still flowing, or does it stop once the conversation still flows? So thank you, everybody, and see you next time. Thanks so much.